for coming. This is very weird. I feel like I'm hosting a TV show. I wouldn't be very good at it. So, do you mind introducing yourselves and telling us why you are a climate strike and what that is?
Hi, I'm Kay, I'm 14 and I joined back in February when we set this movement up in Scotland. I strike because I'm fed up with being told to make personal change that's insignificant compared to the emissions of massive multinational companies that we can't do anything about. And I'm scared for the future, what it might hold, what it might bring. I'm scared for everyone's futures.
I'm Dylan, I'm 15. I've got my laptop because I didn't have time to print out because I was running for the train. I started striking in February as well. I've kind of been interested since I was about 8 when I joined the school's eco group. And I was really, really confused because all I seemed to do was recycling. And I didn't really get that, and no one seemed to understand what I was saying, even the teacher. So I left and kind of forgot about it for a while because I was 8. And then, over time I kind of learned I couldn't really trust adults. When I was, when I was 9, people lied, so my younger brother would go to school before he was ready. When I was 13, I had my free music tuition taken away because of money. So then, when this came up, I was like, I'm going to do something. I'm old enough, I'm the right age. I'm going to just do it.
Hi, I'm Sarah and I'm 14. I started striking in August because I went to one of the strikes and I felt super empowered when I was there, and it made me want to look into what was actually going on. And honestly, when I read it, it was really, really terrifying, and it sort of fueled me to keep going and keep looking for something more to do than simple personal changes. And I felt like I needed to tell everyone and make it the biggest thing of my life ever. And just the more that I've been getting into it, the more motivated and the more terrified I feel each day to keep striking and keep trying to get more people to come.
Very good. Thank you very much all of you for coming. I guess I'll ask a couple of questions, and then we have the possibility for everyone here to ask questions, if you are okay with that. I guess the first thing to say, well, should all students, all kids, should they be out striking like you are?
Yes.
Yes.
There's every reason to do something about this crisis, and just turning off Dylan's laptop there. And the reasons not to are insignificant compared to the effects that the climate crisis would have if we did nothing. And everyone should be out on the streets. Everyone has a voice, and this is the time to make use of it.
I had a point, I've kind of forgotten it. It's the single most important thing society's ever experienced. We've never experienced something quite like this, where billions of us are actually threatened. So people often talk about education, but I often argue that there's a lot you can gain from the protests. So before I had really, really bad anxiety. This kind of thing would freak me out. But through it, I was like, a lot of us have actually become really confident. And then on top of the achievements we've made, if everyone did it, we would achieve even more. It would also be really good for our well-being.
Like Dylan was saying, I have such a bad fear of speaking in front of people, but since I started SYCS, I've started talking to more people and starting talking assemblies in my school, and it's just helped me to not only deal with eco-anxiety, but also I have diagnosed anxiety, and it's helped me so much to become more confident in that. And 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 also to deal with skills in school, like working in groups and managing people and all that kind of thing as well.
Do you think as you'll get older, do you think that'll inspire you to keep on going, to keep on fighting for climate justice?
Definitely,
Yeah.
Really good.
If you want, I can give you both microphones if that helps.
That would really, yeah. Okay. Yes, of course we're going to keep going. I think this kind of thing is going to be precarious until even we're gone. You know, these things might not become sustainable. So we have to make sure everything is sustainable now for, we could do that for more than 100 years. So we kind of have that responsibility to, so obviously we'll have to keep an eye on it because as the adults now can't be trusted to resist the adults in 50 years to be considered.
I'm not giving up anytime soon. We still have so far to go, and with each little step that we affect change, it inspires me to go further because we've started this, but we need to keep the ball rolling because otherwise, if we give up, then politicians are going to lose all motivation and the pressure from us, and nothing will happen. Yeah, definitely, we'll still keep going. As the older we get, unfortunately, the more power we get. So we're able to do more to help save our futures and get things like jobs and do work with that to help contribute to it. And the climate crisis is not going anywhere soon. Even if we do action now to help delay the time, it will still be a constant struggle to keep the world sustainable and to not fall back into old habits as well.
Very good. I think it's time we go around. There are 2 roving microphones. So we've got one with Kate over here, and the other one is with Cammy over here. So those of you who are not the climate strikers, if you could raise your hand or just make yourself known, and that way we can have a nice discussion. So we'll start with the first question. Go
So, thank you very much for coming to join us tonight. Obviously, we're all Green Party members, so we're on side. Who do you think we have to convince? Whose minds is it that we all have to change?
I would say that it's not necessarily changing people's minds, it's more, opening mind. So a lot of people know it's a thing, but because it's not conveyed as serious as it is, they don't think it's as serious as it is. So it's kind of more about getting across the severity, which I think is one of the reasons why these strikes have been so successful, because it's the first time the general people have understood how bad it is. I think there's a lot of people who think we still, we could use oil yesterday. I had one telling me it was all just about the sun. So there's something we can convince as long as we have the majority. I think it'll be good, maybe? Hopefully.
Anyone in their right mind, when presented with all the facts and how urgent this crisis is, wouldn't oppose any action to suppress the effects of it. So, even just in the last 6 months, Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future, everyone combined has opened people's minds to it and made people lots more informed, and that's starting to affect the change. But we need to focus our efforts on the people in power. And do you think any of the politicians can be bothered to read the entire IPCC report? It's really complicated and hard. And to get across the severity of it, you have to be really harsh, and sometimes it puts some people off, but that's the reality of it. And I think all politicians need to know that. Yeah, I think it's really important that people are aware of the truth and for it to be seen as a fact and not an opinion. And for this to be in education, not only for children and people in university, but also like adults, and knowing that this will affect every sector of life.
We have two on either side.
Thanks. Thanks very much for coming out. I'm curious about something that you kind of all were talking about here, about getting across the severity of the situation. And one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is we've seen these big marches in Edinburgh, big protests, kind of marching through the streets and going down to Parliament, Holyrood, and having a rally, which has been good. And we've also seen Extinction Rebellion in London taking much more direct action and trying to disrupt airports and do some traffic and everything like that. And I was wondering what your views are on what kind of we need to do, what the most effective way is of drawing attention to the severity of the situation, and whether the kind of really disruptive action, which seems proportionate to the severity of the situation, might harm the message because it means people can just point to so-called bad behavior rather than the underlying issue. Sorry, it's kind of a long, complicated question, but hopefully it makes sense. Cheers.
Yeah. Well, SYCS, we strictly keep everything we do legal, partially just so it's an alternative for parents to XR, because a lot of people have been interested in that, but, you know, as you said, like, it comes with disruption and illegality, and all parents don't want their kids getting involved with that. So we strictly keep our stuff legal, but in my opinion, if you don't fix something like this and it just gets worse, then why wouldn't we make the loudest noise we can, which could involve doing stuff illegal? You know, we're being civil now, it's kind of like, we could just go join XR. So the Edinburgh City Council, I don't know if you knew about it, but when we were trying to get the route for the march along Prince Street, they said that would be illegal. I was actually in that meeting, it was not very nice. But if they're telling us it's going to be illegal, then why wouldn't we just go join XR? If the nice way we're trying to do becomes illegal, we will just go join XR. Some disruptions, personally, we're not all very keen on, I would say. Disrupting a environmentally friendly public transport system was probably not the best idea, but the majority of XR didn't actually want that to happen anyways. So, you know, we know it doesn't represent the majority. Yeah, I'm going on a lot. We generally support XR, we remain different organisations, but I think they're 100% justified, and really, I think a couple of people are starting to understand it and think, well, this is fair enough.
I think whilst Extinction Rebellion is an amazing group of very committed people, but that's not to say I support everything they do. They have some quite obvious flaws with inclusion of people from more like minorities, and they occasionally their messaging is a bit offensive and exclusive to some groups. Especially with the tube action, it ends up marginalising the mainly working class people that were using the tube to get to work and how to get to work. In London, if you look at, someone had been doing a poll on XR's like approval rating, and it immediately fell. So that small group of members has shot the entirety of XR in the foot. And so while direct action can be beneficial in some places, and with some actions, when they're designed badly, it can be really damaging to the cause.
Yeah, the good thing about doing illegal things is that there's also quite a lot of privilege when it comes to being arrested, because groups, more minorities, can have a harder time being arrested in legal courts. So we offer something that you can still take action and you can still really make an impact without having any of the repercussions that can really be quite severe to some people. I have nothing against XR, but it just shows another option, and loads of people, it gives sort of a medium step between being fully committed and being just unaware of the situation, because I know when I didn't really know much about this, I wouldn't have just jumped in head first into it. I needed to like build it up little by little, and that is, if we're trying to engage everyone, we have to give them an easy and convenient way to take action while still making their voice heard.
So we have 5 minutes left. Is there 1 or 2 more questions? We have one here.
First of all, this one?
Is it turned on?
There we go.
First of all, big up you guys a sec. Second of all, I've only been on one climate march, sorry. I do work in renewables, so if I strike it doesn't make any sense. But when I was there, I noticed that there was people your age and up to sort of young student age, and then there was a gap, and then there was people of parents' age. Now, how can we get the people of roughly my age to join in and strike with you guys? Because that would make a massive difference, I reckon. Like, how do we light the fire under people my age is better?
That's a really hard question to answer. Because we've been trying to find an answer to that one as well. Because, yes. Because we get all the young people and students out because it's really easy to spread a message through like schools and social media with that demographic of people. And it's mainly their future that's going to be affected. So I think it's kind of a natural thing to care about. And older people, grandparents, parents, people of that generation, a lot of them are feeling guilty about not doing anything like this previously and are feeling scared for their own relatives and younger kids and that sort of thing. But the middle group is kind of hard to interact with for people of our age, and sometimes it's quite hard to find someone to connect with them about, which makes it harder to like get the message out to them, I think.
Kind of building off of that, quite a lot of what we say is fight for your future or what will you tell your children. So the children one that will always kind of impact 40 and up, maybe like 35. Another one could be like job security. So when you're just at uni, you might not necessarily have that secure job where you can give up a Friday. And older people can just say, oh, I'm just going to take the day off today, and it's not as big of a deal. I think it's also kind of maybe the midlife kind of crisis age. I don't know. Kind of, but I think a general state of is getting younger and younger. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like feeling of like not really caring. You know, it's not your future that's impacted, and it's not your kids yet, so you don't have that emotional attachment. It's that kind of like in between age. So yeah.
I mean, what we really do with advertising is like social media and leafleting and things like that. So I'm not really sure how we would be able to get that sort of demographic. But I'll see what I can try and do.
I think we had one more question, was it? Or several questions. We'll take from Alison, if that's okay. And if you have more questions later on, we do have a breakout session. I'm sorry, I'm not using my microphone. I'll say that again. We do have a breakout session later on in the meeting. It's an annoying noise in the background, by the way. So please do also use the opportunity to talk to our climate strategists then. So Alison, well, last question. We might eat into the next bit of time, but that should be okay.
Okay, just a quick question. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening and for your contribution. It's fabulous what you're doing. You're making it easier for us as Scottish Green Party members to get our message across, so we cannot thank you enough. Dylan, you kind of touched on this in one of your earlier comments. You said that, okay, you're out of school, but you're learning a lot through what you're doing. There was one day, Patrick might remember this not too long ago, in Parliament, where there were members of another party shouting that you should be in school. And one person in particular who I know is a parent of a young child, and I was very, very surprised at this approach from a party that apparently is all about social justice. But I'd just like to ask you what message you'd like us to take back to those who claim that you should be in school. Thank you.
There's quite a few things for me. First of all, I find it really offensive actually, as I actually have a disability. I don't make it to school very often, and that's been that way for almost 4 years. So saying that, you could only be successful if you have a future if you go to school, I find kind of demeaning, because it's like, you can only be successful, and I think I'm doing all right. It just doesn't show that they care, because this has been probably the most effective climate change campaign, I would say, ever. So, when you have a campaign, you have to do something that attracts headlines when there's not many of you. You have to do something big. So, a big thing you can do on your own is not go to school. Saying you're striking from work is like one thing. But saying you're striking school, that's never really been heard of before. So it instantly got headlines, which got more people. And then that got more headlines, and then suddenly it's everywhere. And that's not happened with climate change before, so if they want to tell us to go to school, then fix climate change.
I'd like to say that the education system isn't the best in Scotland anyway. I've learned way more outside of school, running campaigns and learning valuable life skills that I'm going to use far more than how to do simultaneous equations in maths. When am I going to need to know what x equals y? But I definitely will be using the skills I've gained through this, and I think schools should be more open to kind of life skills that they need to teach, and not purely based on academic, learning. So, if you want me to go back to school, I'd say fix climate change, and then maybe fix schools.
Yeah, it just shows how much can be achieved with one day of striking versus one day of school. All I do on a Friday is have a maths cake day for the first 2 periods, and then I have a biology class where we go over the week's homework, and then I have an English class where it's not very productive because my class are always chatting. So, and it just shows how much can happen at a strike. In one day from going to a strike, I completely changed my mindset from being hesitant to going and almost embarrassed to go because the rest of my friends thought that it was not very cool or interesting. So I ended up going with people I didn't really know very well. But from there, I had to do something about it, and I was so excited at the end of it, and I knew I had to tell other people, and I didn't really care if it was normal or not. It just completely changed me that day. And each of the big strikes, and even the weekly strikes that we have, each time that I go to it, I learn something more and more, and just become out a much more confident and ready person to do what I can to help.
definitely see more of this. Personally, I do like a good protest. Yes, so we're now going to hand over actually to our co-leaders. We have Lorna Slater and Patrick Harvey. Thanks once more, and we'll hand over to our co-leaders. I'm going to quickly introduce them and then I'll pass the microphones over to them. In fact, yes, you three can stay there. I apologise for not standing in front of you all, I apologise. Okay, so we have our co-leaders. I will hand over the microphone, and I know that also Patrick and Lorna are going to also repeat a lot of what they told us at the conference in terms of the Green New Deal, because many of you, for example, were not at the conference, and it's a fantastic new policy platform that we hope will interest many of you today. So I'll pass this one over to Patrick as well.
Hi, I'm Lorna Slater.
I'm Patrick.
And we're the co-leaders. So we're going to do a shortened, improvised version of the speech that we did at the conference. We're going to see how that goes. So I started by introducing myself. So I'm Lorna Slater. My day job is that I work in renewable energy, and you guys have absolutely got me pegged because I am a midlife crisis environmentalist. When I was in my 30s, I decided I needed to change jobs and to do something more meaningful with my life. So I quit my job in semiconductors and moved to renewable energy. And then around about the time when I was 40, I joined the Greens. So you've got me nailed, absolutely. So that's I've been co-leader for a couple of months now, and working with Patrick at the Greens. And I think what else is it? Oh yeah, I had a big year. I went to the Antarctic in January with women scientists from all over the world, and we were studying leadership in climate change there.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned in your intro that you were also doing soccer school, and so I got to make a joke about the fact that I only work in Parliament. There's no crossover at all there. I've been Glasgow's Green MSP since 2003. When I was elected, I think I would have been the equivalent of the Ross Greer of the time, you know, one of the young ones. And I still kind of think of myself that way, but externally people all start calling me veteran MSP and horrible things like that. So I'm kind of getting used to the fact that I'm fully institutionalised, but I'm also very, very aware of the experience that's built up, and particularly about how issues like climate have been dealt with. And renewables. And over that period, successive governments and successive parliaments have set ambitious targets on things like renewable energy, and every single time they've been scoffed at and people have said, that's unachievable, it can't be done. And we've exceeded those targets. And I think it genuinely shows what can be achieved if we set the expectations high. So, I think I kind of opened the session by talking a little bit about the political context. The state of politics at the moment, it almost doesn't bear repeating. Some of the state of things, particularly with the Brexit crisis and the incredible sense of missed opportunity. If the time and energy and focus and attention that's gone into Brexit had gone into an issue like the climate emergency, we'd be achieving great things. We'd be achieving great transformational things. And this entirely engineered unnecessary crisis has just been sucking energy up. It keeps on getting worse. And just in the last week, my committee in Parliament took evidence from Michael Gove about Brexit, and there's just an utter unwillingness to accept the impact on Scotland, the lack of any democratic consent for Scotland, and crushingly important issues like the environmental governance gap that is going to open up if we don't have the UK government held to account by the European institutions on environmental governance. There is next to nothing in the way of replacement for that architecture of environmental governance, either to the UK government or the Scottish government, or down at the local authority level as well, where councils have to implement things like EU air quality regulations, and there's a complete open question mark about what is going to be the nature of that accountability now if we are outside the EU.
So my main speech at conference was on the theme of courage, and it was something that I've noticed in the media and in our current political discourse for the Trumps and Johnsons of the day. They lie, they're dishonest, because honesty takes courage. It's much easier to lie. And the kind of honesty we need, the kind of courage we need, is to say things are going to change. Either we change them and make significant changes to our society, or the world is still going to change, but it's going to change in a bad way. We either take control of the situation and manage our emissions, manage climate change, or climate change will overrun us and it will overrun our grandkids. So there's an honesty that we have to have and a courage that we have to say, you know, cotton buds, recyclable cotton buds and electric cars aren't going to do it. It's going to have to be much, much more significant than that. And I admire your guys' courage for standing up and saying this out loud when adults are saying you're silly, you're kids, don't be ridiculous. You're right, and you have courage to say so, and that's what we need. And at a conference, we also announced our Holyrood candidates. And I was particularly proud of all the women and non-binary people who put themselves forward as candidates. The number one worry we have from people who are standing is about abuse on social media. And after the death of Joe, or the murder of Joe Cox, women putting themselves forward in politics, particularly trans women or disabled women or women of colour, are genuinely putting themselves in danger of abuse, but also actually in danger. And so I was so proud to see these women and non-binary people have the courage to answer my call and put themselves forward. I couldn't be prouder. So I think we are all called upon to have courage and be honest about where we are.
There was a good session as well as part of that opening plenary about green impact, about the way that we're making an impact through political action at council and Scottish Parliament level. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key areas that we know that we need to do better at that and do more of that is connecting a green agenda to the economy, because the economy is one of these areas where, you know, it drives people's voting behaviour. There is a significant, and I think a growing number of people who will put the environment as the top of the issues when the pollsters ask them what's important. But there are more people who are going to be concerned about what does this mean for my job, what does this mean for my community, what does this mean for investment in the services out there. So we need to be articulating much more clearly actually what is a green economy. And again, one of our guest speakers talked about the responsibility of corporations or big economic systems, which a lot of us feel are outside our own control. The green approach needs to encourage people to question the basis on which current economic policy works, the idea of relentless, everlasting economic growth. For old-fashioned, traditional core green reasons of saying everlasting growth on a finite planet is unsustainable, but also looking forward, engaging people with new ideas about actually what does well-being mean? What makes your life livable? What makes your life a positive, enjoyable thing? It's not GDP figures. It's not necessarily all about growing the economy. Often it'll be about how well we share the wealth that's generated. Does the wealth that we all generate in the economy get hoovered up by those who need it the least? Or do we generate that wealth in a collective way and spend it and share it in a collective way so that everybody's needs are met? Catherine Quebec was on one of the sessions and talked about the Human Time Index, an alternative approach to trying to understand what are the economic metrics, what would economic success look like if you actually listen to what people need to live well in their communities. And the kind of answers that it generated did involve aspects to do with material wealth, but it was about having enough money to pay the bills, and there was a lot that wasn't about material wealth. It was about having time to spend with friends and family. So I think a lot of people understand the concept of enough in a way that a lot of economists and politicians don't. And they just relentlessly prioritise more, instead of a different approach to how an economy can serve our needs.
So that brings us to the Green New Deal. So the original New Deal was put in place by Roosevelt after the Depression in America. And I recently got into a fun fight with an economist over this, but whatever the intention of the policies were, what they did was reshape the economic structure of America and put in place at that time, world-leading welfare state. It changed how money flowed through the economy. It changed where power was. And that's what we need. And this is what the Green New Deal will aim to achieve. So the Green New Deal needs to not only build a sustainable economy, but it needs to deal with the gross inequalities that we see in our society. And as Greens, we feel that those things are connected. At the moment, the Green New Deal that we're pitching is really not much more than headlines. And that's where you all come in tonight. So between now, when we've announced our Green New Deal as a sort of headline, and the 2021 Holyrood election, we as a party need to develop a manifesto, a detailed set of white papers to say exactly what this Green New Deal is going to be. It will probably involve things like a Scottish National Investment Bank, because one of the big parts of this new economy is that a lot more of it is going to have to be publicly owned. We cannot continue to have things, especially public services, that are run just for profit, for the benefit of the few, to borrow from other parties' phraseology. We have to have public services run for the benefit of the public. Land has to be used for the benefit of the people who live on it, not for people living in, keeping their money in tax havens offshore, that kind of thing. So tonight is your chance to put some thought and some ideas behind what you'd like to see of a Green New Deal. What would your well-being economy look like? What's enough to you? What is a good life to you? I assume none of you are looking for yachts and tax havens. What's actually a good life, and what does that look like? Do we want to run through these, or should we call it? I know we're running a bit behind time.
We are better within 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I think it's completely fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say?
I would reinforce what Lorna's saying there about the... Is that on again? Yeah. The document that we published on Green New Deal, you can go to the party website and click the link underneath these two fabulous faces that you'll see on the front page of the website, and it will take you to the document that we published. It is the beginning of a conversation, and we want you and other branches around the country, but also other people who are interested in shaping our policy, whether that's community groups, NGOs, campaigners, academics, school strikers, everybody to help shape that into a Green New Deal. Other political parties are already adopting this language. They're adopting the language of a Green Deal or a Scottish Green Deal or a Green Industrial Revolution. They're tilting in the right direction. They're not charging ahead in the right direction. And we need to demonstrate how you can actually put these ideas into practice now. It needs to be just. It needs to be fair. The green economy that we want to build has to be a fairer, more equal economy as well. It has to be one that recognises the inequalities that are currently baked into our society and find ways of overcoming those. It has to be a healthier society and one that doesn't just care for the environment, but does it in a way that cares for the people who live in the environment.
And of course, we're not going to forget the other equalities that matter to us. We're going to keep pushing for GRA reform. We've got mixed-sex civil partnerships now.
That's just been announced,
yep.
Yeah. So we were the first political party to say, I think about 15 years ago, maybe more, that you should have civil partnership that's open to all and marriage that's open to all. We're finally about to reach that position in Scotland after a long, long time of getting there.
Abortion is now a devolved matter in Scotland, but it needs to be decriminalised. And the other area of equality that we're particularly concerned about is that of EU citizens. This having to apply for settled status to stay in your own home is obscene and is not even what the Leavers were promising on that side of that bus and so forth.
So I think that covers most of what we got through. You can still see, I think, the video of the full version of the speech where we actually had our proper notes in front of us, so we were a little bit more fluent. You can see that up on the party website, I think, the video clip from the conference, as well as masses of other amazing plenary sessions from party conference.
Now, I'll hand back to James.
Now we're going to hand over, I think, to the climate strikers themselves. Basically, yes, feel free to interrogate these two. These two are here to... but no, basically, this is an opportunity to have a bit of a discourse between you five. And I'll keep one microphone here and maybe another microphone over there.
We've got some councillors and MSPs in the audience, so I will throw you under the bus. Just saying.
Enter the spot.
Generally, we really like the idea of a Green New Deal. We did a people's kind of assembly thing where we had people come together and like from across Scotland and say what they want, and then we like cut that down into a document. Overwhelmingly, a lot of people said they wanted a Green New Deal. So you've got the backing of the people we talked to as well, which I think you were there when we presented it to some MSPs. So yeah, there's only like a few questions we have because it seems great. How are you going to like educate people on what it is? Because obviously you're going to like a specific set of like skilled workers. So they'll need to know like what skills to have in this industry. So how are you going to teach them what it is?
So is that a question about how we're going to train people up to work in the new economy, or is that a question about how we're going to tell people about what the Green New Deal is?
I think I sometimes mix myself up in that too, so both.
Brilliant. I can take the second one. I can have a stab at both. So I work, as I said, in renewable energy, and I work for a company that builds tidal turbines. And the technology that we use and the sort of engineering, heavy metal welding, metal cutting, fabrication, as well as all the design work, is very similar to what is used in oil and gas to do. It's a similar kind of engineering. So in a lot of ways, what we have to communicate to people is that a Green New Deal doesn't mean you lose your job. You keep your job, but in fact, you're just going to be working in a different industry. So we call that a just transition. So unlike when sort of the coal mines were closed and people were losing their jobs, what we really need to communicate is, no, we need you. In fact, we really need you. If we're going to build tidal turbines and wind turbines and re-insulate all the houses in Scotland, then we need to absolutely build better railroads. We absolutely need skilled workers to do all of these things. So that's something that we need to communicate. And in fact, in places like Dundee, where we're building the turbine, they're having to recruit people back because when the shipbuilding was lost, of course, people emigrated or moved away to often to the Far East where they do a lot of shipbuilding. And now we're having to lure everyone back. The jobs are here. Ross Greer and I visited the forestry department of the University of Highlands Islands just before conference. Forestry is something we're very keen on. So currently, only about 18% of Scotland is forested. That's way below the European average. We'd like to see it closer to 40%. Now, at the rate of planting trees that the SNP have planned, that will take 150 years. Forests are wonderful carbon sinks, as well as being wonderful for tourism and just having a wonderful time, and for commercial logging as well. So there are jobs in forestry that we can't fill. So to some extent, these jobs already exist, and the Department of Forestry at Highlands and Islands, their course isn't even full. People don't even go to study there because nobody. I'm sure, as anyone, like every your teacher said, you can have a career in forestry. No one ever said that to me either. So there's part of that. And in terms of telling people about the Green New Deal, to some extent that's Patrick and my job as spokespeople to go on television and stand in front of people, but it's also all of these members' jobs, because what we do is we knock on people's doors and say, we're the Greens, have you thought about going green? So to some extent that's all of us.
Yeah, I was actually thinking when all three of you were speaking earlier about how it is we engage people with change, with the idea that change can be something they can embrace. And I guess it's something that we all ask ourselves, whether we're knocking on doors and putting leaflets through letterboxes, or striking and marching, or indeed learning the algebra that could help you be a brilliant renewable energy engineer one day as well. All good stuff. But how do we engage people with change? My last job before I was in politics was in health promotion. My particular role was in sexual health, but I think some of the same arguments relate to exercise or food or smoking and drinking. How do you get people to change their behaviour? And acknowledging that we don't just want to get people to change their behaviour in the sense of changing their light bulb or recycling more or not going on holiday by plane. We want to get people angry about the way our society has been failing on climate. We want to get people motivated for political change, not just personal change. But how do you get people to change their behaviour? And it isn't just by telling people the facts. We all know that. We all know that probably we all do some things that are a bit unhealthy for us. We know that they're unhealthy, but we do them because we like them, or because we can't be bothered changing. And a lot of it relates to how we feel, not what we know. And all of you spoke a bit about feelings, about whether you felt frightened or anxious or empowered. And those are the kind of things that I think motivate people to change their behaviour. In public health, if you want to change people's behaviour, they need to believe that the change is meaningful, that it's something within their grasp, that it's something they can do. It needs to be normalised in the sense of other people around them. You know, that you're less likely to get people to change if you're asking them to be the first mover. But also they have to care about the outcome. You know, they have to care about whether it's their health or their community or their local environment. And so I think we need to get better at engaging with the emotional aspects of these things and telling stories about, you know, how climate will affect people now, how it is affecting people now, how renewable energy is rolling out and how it's a positive thing, how the change in the way that we live our lives and the way that we run our economy can be a positive thing. I think we need more than just facts and figures, we need compelling stories. And I think that engages with the emotional factors that really drive people to make different decisions. People have to believe that the changes we're talking about are good for them, are worth making, are not scary. And yeah, I've kind of gone off on a long one, and I didn't really decide at the start how I was going to end this, but I think
This is more of a specific question, but do you plan on working with the other parties in the government to implement the new Green Deal?
yeah, I think especially in the Scottish Parliament, we don't really have a winner-takes-all kind of mindset. Westminster is a bit like that. Westminster still works with kind of winner-takes-all mentality where the government just wants to do its own thing and the opposition wants to say that everything the government is doing is terrible. In the Scottish Parliament, it's a multi-party system, it's a fairer voting system, so it's much less likely that one party gets its own way on everything. So if you want to influence change, and we have done, whether that's on things like you know, marine protected areas or energy efficiency measures in the home or taxation or, you know, protecting local services, we've managed to influence change by working together with others. And I think all political parties have got some people who are naturally drawn to finding common ground and finding solutions that they can work together on across party lines. And all political parties have also got people who are naturally drawn to factional infighting and saying we are right and you're wrong and that's the end of it. And I think the former way of engaging is much more effective, and I like to think that it's much more the natural green way of engaging as well, that we are drawn to that kind of constructive engagement. We'll challenge where we think we need to challenge them, but where they're doing, you know, kind of okay, we'll push them to go further, and where they're doing the right thing, we'll support them. And I genuinely think there are people in most political parties who get a lot of this, and the momentum for change will only happen if it's across party lines.
To many politicians and the people in power at the Scottish Government, a Green New Deal is a buzzword to attract more voters. How will you and the Greens make sure to emphasise the depth to it and how it's not just a fix, like everything one fix all?
Well, we hope it will be in everything in one fix all. No, but I know what you mean. So it's very frustrating to us, as Patrick mentioned it briefly, when other political parties steal our language, if you like. When the Tory party, they start calling their minimum wage a living wage when it isn't. When, you know, Nicola Sturgeon says climate emergency, but decades of oil and gas extraction. So they take our language and they dilute it because they know language is powerful. So we, because we're sort of historically, until you guys made it mainstream, thank you, we were always the sort of radical fringe, you know, and part of that is that we inject ideas into the mainstream. So we'll say things like £10 minimum wage, you know, 4-day working week, and 10 years later, Labour will go, oh, we've got these great ideas, £10 minimum wage, and you know. So by bringing climate ideas mainstream, that's something that your movement has helped with enormously. And we have had green MSPs in the Scottish Parliament from the beginning. We have councillors all over Scotland. So we are able to demonstrate that we can do practical things. We have a track record now. So we're not the radical fringe anymore. We can demonstrate that we can get stuff done. So part of our Green New Deal will be a lot of very practical suggestions. Like with all these things, it's about where the money goes and where the power goes and who has that. And the point of a Green New Deal will be to put the power back with people, so that it's not, we were talking about this week in respect to Brexit, but the power at the moment with Brexit sits with a few Tories in Westminster. Brexit is being done to us from a great distance, and that's not how politics should be. We should all have a say in what happens to us. So that's about where the power lies. And the other thing is about where the money is, and is getting that money back in from offshore tax havens, recirculating it through the economy, through people that need it. And that will be things through the investment bank. So the Green New Deal, our version of the Green New Deal, will be full of very, very practical things that a government of Scotland will be able to do. If we were an independent country, we could do more, but that's not an excuse. That is not an excuse to do nothing.
Yeah, there's something about local control as well. I so wish that a progressive movement was the one that came up with the slogan "Take Back Control," because it was a really powerful slogan for understandable reasons. Most people naturally want to have a bit of control of their lives, of their communities, of their families, and the Brexit project is just a way of taking control from one place and giving it to another small elite of Etonians and millionaires and privileged people in the cabinet and what have you. But taking back control, a Green New Deal would help people to take back control. Public ownership would help people to take back control. Accountability of political and economic power would help people to take back control. One of the things that I reflected on at conference as well was this presentation I was at recently by the Deputy Mayor of Vienna, former Deputy Mayor of Vienna, who was a Green, who was talking about this incredible transformation around public transport. It's now €1 a day for the whole public transport network of Vienna. Transformation of public space, this commitment they've got to keep on providing more new green spaces, more new open spaces within the city. Control and transformation of housing, so they keep high density, high quality, efficient, affordable housing in the city, so that people with families can actually afford to live in this brilliant, easy travel to work area and walk or cycle to work. And we're thinking, why can't Edinburgh do this? Why can't Glasgow do this? And the reason is ownership and control. Local decision making. 62% of housing in the city is either social or subsidised affordable housing. The public transport company is publicly owned. A huge amount of land is publicly owned. Privatisation, as well as centralisation, as well as austerity, are things that have taken control away from people. And I think if we give that control through public ownership and through decentralising decision making, I think a lot of communities will see the opportunity for a greener, safer, healthier community that they can live in as something that actually gives them some empowerment and some control of their lives, instead of everything being operated in the interests either of politicians that they don't have a relationship to, or corporations and companies they don't have a relationship to. So there's something about that desire that we've all got to have a bit of control, and that would, I think, be one of the ways of getting over this sense of people feeling disempowered because climate is such a big, scary, complicated thing, you know.
Just a kind of quick but complex one. Do you think it actually will be implemented by Parliament?
Well, there's this question, as I said before, about change coming. Change is coming. Either climate change will overrun us, or we have to make big changes. And I think the closer the more that these things become visible, the more noise your generation can make, the more Greens you can vote into Parliament, just throw it out there. The more difference it can make. If we start not voting for companies that are promising supporting corporate greed, if we stop voting for companies or for parties that want to centralize power away from people and keep digging out fossil fuels, if we can get the message out there to put the people in power who share your values, and that's something that we're lucky in Scotland to have a proportional parliament, because everyone can therefore vote for a party that shares their values. With the Westminster system, you end up voting for the least worst option that you think might keep the worst option out. So part of this system change is about changing things like voting systems. And the problem is that that's quite boring, unless you're in there, like a lot of the people in this room, and to talk about the details of different voting systems. A lot of people find that really boring, but actually those kind of systems need to change to make these sorts of systems happen, because unless the parties think that they'll lose votes, they won't do it. That's the sort of currency that they run on, or donations if you're a Tory party. That's the currency they run on. So part of this is you guys convincing your generation that you will withhold your votes from people from parties who don't share your values, and then convincing the rest of the generations the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will make the changes that are necessary. The question is, will we do it fast enough? Will we do it soon enough? And will we do it fair enough? That is going to depend. It comes back, I think, to what I was saying earlier about normalising this. A climate strike normalises the feeling that other people care about climate change. A green campaign on the doorstep normalises this. These are people active in my community, people who care about this emergency. XR as well, even when they do questionable stunts that I think we've all recognised. I think a lot of people were nodding when you were talking about that. Even when they do stuff that is not right, it normalises the sense that there is a body of people out there who care about this and who are angry about this. So anything and everything that we can do that normalises that expectation will help to accelerate the action of all political parties across the spectrum to say we need to act, and we need to act soon, and we need to get this right with that sense of urgency. So when it comes to voting systems, the only thing I would add is I have the strong feeling tonight that we haven't reduced the voting age enough yet.
I just had an idea there. So many people in this room will be familiar with the concept of the Overton window. Yeah, are you guys familiar with this? So in politics, we often talk about the left and the right. So left would be more socialist values, right would be capitalist values. And the Overton window is sort of how normal things seem. So given that we've had a Conservative government for a long time, they're going, Jeremy Corbyn's radical left. That's because the Overton window has moved to the right. I wonder if there's something similar for climate change. So like, I come from Canada, where we have a Conservative Party also, but our Conservative Party is essentially like your Labour Party, because the Overton window in Canada is a one jump to the left. So these things are relative, and I wonder if there is a similar thing for greenness, where you could put the parties on a scale, and what's a normal amount of greenness would be different.
If not, we can maybe get questions from the audience. We have 7 minutes.
So I've just been having a bit of a chat on Slack with the trade union group, which aren't constituted but are starting to get a bit more active in the party. Because I think that the Green New Deal has got potential, but I think, this morning I was listening to the radio and I heard Rebecca really basically talk about these kinds of values, but facing opposition from unions, from workers who basically stand to benefit if these kinds of policies are implemented. And I would like to know, so far, since kind of publicly going public with this Green New Deal strapline and the documents and so on, have you had conversations with the unions and with members of unions and workforces who would be positively affected by this? And have you been able to have those kind of conversations and that dialogue? Because I think winning over those voices is going to be really important in actually gaining traction for this, and I'd be interested to know how you can all support that, what we can do.
So we had Stephen Smiley, who from, I think it was Unison, at conference, and he was making a really good case for the fact that in a lot of places around the world, the green movement hasn't done a good job of engaging unions and workers. For example, the big mine in Australia, where the Greens are campaigning to shut it down, but they haven't put in a suggested transition. So all the families who, I mean, they know on some level that they can't keep digging up coal forever, but equally they still need to feed their kids next month and pay their mortgages. And so the green movement there has failed to do that. So that is something that we absolutely must do. So having Stephen Smiley at conference, I think, was the beginning of that. And I think this is the beginning of it. Because you're right, we have to tell a story about just transition. We have to, we'll make a plan. So this is something that interests me that came out of conference, was it seems obvious when you say it, but it was one of those things that it hadn't occurred to me that we have to pick a day upon which we will no longer dig up fossil fuels in Scotland. Maybe that day, well, we would say it should be within a decade. This, S&P might say it's a few decades, but the point is you could pick a day, and then you know how many workers work in that industry. You know how many people you've got to retransition. You know how much sort of economic value that industry produces that you have to replace with equivalent value jobs. You could make a plan for that. That is completely and absolutely something that you could do. But that isn't something that we've had in the discourse at all. There is no planning. And the danger is that you end up like what would happen with coal mining in the UK. You shut down the coal mines with no one else to go, and you blight neighbourhoods, and you devastate families and people's futures. So this is something we absolutely have to start to do, is talk about the just transition and incorporate trade unions and stuff. So I very much hope that we'll be able to put the Green New Deal through all the sort of elements of the party.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that our engagement with the union movement, organised labour in the broadest sense, is going to be critical to expanding the possibility of getting support for this kind of agenda. And trade unions should be our natural allies in this. Trade unions, like political parties, like businesses, like communities, are made up of human beings, and they're diverse, and they don't all think with one brain. There are some of them who get it, and some of them who don't. There are some of them who will take a forward-looking, kind of foresighted approach to this, and think, changing our economy is about investing in something better. And there are others who will take a rearguard action and say, what you people want to do is shut down my industry. Folk like the nuclear industry, for example, very, very hostile to green politics, the unions who represent the workforce in those industries. And I can understand why, because if they don't believe that this agenda is about investing in something better for them and their communities, why would they buy in? So yeah, we need to change that agenda, and there are people both in individual unions and the STUC who absolutely get this, and we need to be maximising, not just engaging with them, but maximising their voice within the union movement. So if there's anybody in here who isn't in a union and who thinks that they could, as well as being fantastically active Green Party members, could also spend a bit of time engaging in the workplace within the union and raising these issues, that's something that would be really, really positive for us as a party, as well as for the unions.
You kind of touched on public sector ownership, etc., in your opening speech. I'd just like to hear a wee bit more on that, kind of the extent to which you think that kind of state intervention is necessary, and particularly maybe some thoughts on the energy sector specifically and using it to kind of subsidise low prices, etc.
So from my point of view, I think there's two elements to, two different shapes to the public sector. One would be the big national elements, like nationalising the railways, renationalising the railways. And the other one is the community ownership level of it as well. So I think we want to break the grip of the big 6 energy companies who work for profit and stitch up prices between them and so on. And having a national energy company would solve that. But actually, to really take back control, what you want is community energy schemes. So you get together with the people in your town or your neighbourhood, and you look at a common heating scheme, or you look at a common solar panel scheme, or you invest in a tidal turbine or a wind turbine, and then you get the benefits from that, because unfortunately, a lot of the renewables that have been put in Scotland have been put in by big corporations who just want profit. And they sometimes throw a few pennies at a local community centre stuff, but here we are, here's communities which have wind turbines on every hill who don't get a penny from it and didn't get a say in where those turbines went and the new roads that got built and didn't get that new school they were promised. And that's where the renewable industry, as long as it's in the hand of sort of capitalists, will always end up going a bit wrong, where it should be community-owned stuff. I mean, why shouldn't a town get together, pool their money, buy a wind turbine, and then everybody gets not only free energy from that, make their money back, but sell it to the next town along the road. Brilliant. And then, even better, then you have a distributed energy system. So centralized systems may be efficient, but they are vulnerable to failure. It goes down, everybody loses power. Whereas if you have little distributed power sources, one village goes down, that's all right, the 3 villages around them can provide them the power. So I think that's the 2 shapes to it that I see.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say as well, I think we've got a screwed up attitude to public ownership in this country, and it's the same in the UK government as it is in the Scottish government. We nationalise the losses and we privatise the profits. If something's failing, we take it into the public sector and say, we can't let this fail. Even if it's an airport whose only business model is to service the US military, apparently, we take that into the public sector and we think we'll keep that going in the public sector while it's making a loss. And then if we can turn it into something profitable, we'll push it back out to the private sector again. I don't think, whether you're left or right wing, I don't think you should be happy with this. From our point of view, people who want successful industries to be run in the public interest, we shouldn't be happy with it. Even on the right, they shouldn't regard that as a decent use of taxpayers' money. They shouldn't regard it as financially prudent. I don't think this attitude that we've got to public ownership in the UK government or the Scottish government can stand for much longer. From my point of view, I hope we return to the idea that things running successfully in public hands, whether that's the state or local communities, is a good thing in its own right. And actually a hell of a lot of our economy would work better, be more accountable. Power would be more accountable if it was in public hands. We can begin to build that at a local level really, really easily right now. We don't actually need independence to begin to build it at a local level. If we achieved independence, then we would have much more of a macroeconomic power that you need to make those huge investment decisions in relation to bigger industries. But there's nothing to stop us starting now. Okay. Thank you all for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much.